Good afternoon. Welcome to today's lecture on Connecticut, the Cradle of Impressionism. This is the first in a series of three. I'm Mickey Porta. I am the coordinator of exhibitions and community engagement here at New Canaan Library, and we are doubly fortunate today to have our presenter, collector Tom Davies. Many of you may know Tom. Tom very generously loaned the historic works that are on exhibition in our gallery right now. He also advised on this show, which is titled Impressionism Then and Now, Dmitri Wright and the American Lineage. Tom also agreed to help us extend the learning for this exhibition by sharing his knowledge and passion for American painting, specifically about those artists who worked in what were 6 colonies around Connecticut during the turn of the century. This 3-part series will explore the development of this important center of Impressionism that is our state of Connecticut. And today we're learning about Cos Cob and Silvermine. Mark your calendars because next Thursday, June 5th at 1 p.m., we will hear about Westport and Old Lyme. And then on Thursday, the following Thursday after that, Thursday, June 12th at 1 p.m., the series concludes with Mystic and Kent. And we also invite you to visit the table here where Tom has brought some more paintings, really exquisite, from his collection along with catalogs. And please visit the show. It's up until Labor Day. So now, please help me welcome Tom Davies.
Thank you. Thank you, Mickey. Hopefully everybody can hear. I welcome all of you. Thank you for coming. I had to promise, Mickey, before I got up here, that I wouldn't run more than 55 minutes. So if I'm running late, what I do is I skip every third word, and hopefully you can make the connections. The crepuscular scenes that are so frequently painted, the autumnal afternoons, the carefully devised perspective that leads into the picture and beyond, all these are inducements, as are their equivalents in nature, to such a passage from the thing before the eye to its intrinsic values to remoter fields of emotion. How many of you have any idea what I just said? I was lost on the second word. Very often, highly scholarly, good, it's working, yeah. Highly scholarly dissertations on art are too often filled with what I call, or what I label, art speak. One erudite scholar talking and trying to impress another, with little or no concern whether the moderately interested or inquisitive onlookers understand a word. I will try to avoid this kind of presentation. Nevertheless, almost every field of serious study has its own jargon, and one like Impressionism, which has been the center of attraction and verbal dissertation for 150 years, definitely has a few essential terms that help understand this style of painting. The acknowledged father of all this is Claude Monet, a transformative figure in the world of art, a resident of Giverny, France. In 1874, he participated in an exhibition of somewhat like-minded French artists with this painting, entitled Impression Sunrise. It created a sensation, much of which was negative. The influential art critic Louis Leroy stated, quote, "Impression, wallpaper, in its embryonic form or state, is more finished." Impressionism was a revolutionary art movement that began in Paris in the mid-1800s. Those adherents rejected the traditional styles of painting and literally transformed the world of art to this day. Technically, Impressionists approached painting in a completely new way, at least for that time, was considered radical, even disturbing. Unlike traditional painters who worked mainly in their studios, Impressionists preferred to work outdoors or en plein air. This is a painting by the great John Singer Sargent of Monet at his easel, working en plein air. Artists realized this practice allowed them to better observe the effects of light and color. Monet realized that colors change depending on the atmosphere and by the color and light reflected from nearby surfaces. Using lighter or high-key colors, Monet applied paint directly to the canvases, preferring not to mix it beforehand. Monet also employed a technique called broken color, using short, choppy brushstrokes, which are intentionally visible and often overlapping. Applying paint this way produces a rough, textured surface on the canvas known as impasto. When lit properly, this produces a scintillating or shimmering effect for the viewer. Of course, the focus of this presentation, of course, is Impressionism. But here's a brief look at the style of painting that preceded it. In fact, transition to it also grew out of developments in France and was referred to as Barbizon paintings. It has as much to do with subject matter as it does technical style of painting. It was an outgrowth of democratic thinking and the recognition that common ordinary people were fit subject matters to paint. It was a rebellion against the strict teachings of the French academies. Generally, the images were darker, with a limited palette and tonal range. Typical of this approach is this landscape by Corot, entitled The Forests of Fontainebleau. The choice of everyday, often rural life is seen in Millet's masterpiece, The Gleaners, 1857. Increasingly, young American students were traveling to Europe to further their study and were exposed to Barbizon teaching. The American adaptation of the Barbizon school became known as tonalism, seeking to capture a mood rather than the details of nature. This approach often represented sunset or sunrise, a more limited and intimate poetic interpretation of the land, usually disregarding small details. This was the state of art when Impressionism hit with such an impact. Young students in France were adopting the principles of Impressionism, while established artists that were tonalists began changing. What you're seeing is a perfect example of American tonalism painted in 1885 by Bruce Crane at 24 years old on Long Island. He developed a signature look in depicting the sunset as a narrow band of yellow along the horizon line. His use of deep gray sky, dark browns of the trees surrounding the yellow sunset enhances the intensity to the viewer's eye. And it's still quite believable. Now, further study in France and Bruce Crane's work evolved from what you just saw to a very unique, sophisticated form of Impressionism, painted circa 1920s as an old lime impressionist. Entitled November, this is a close-up which shows the fully evolved brushwork to adopt the Impressionist broken color technique. Now, if I didn't tell you that these two pictures were painted by the same artist, it's very unlikely you would have guessed it. But it dramatizes the magnitude of change as artists evolved from tonalism to Impressionism. And if you think perhaps this is an isolated example, here is a piece by a tonalist in a tonalist style by the Boston artist Edward Wilbur Dean Hamilton. Best guess, painted along the South Shore of Massachusetts, is stunning with The Afternoon Gray, France, 1889. A lengthy stay in France, especially the colony of Grèce, changed the artist's painting style. This transformation occurred over and over again among the tonalist artists. Now, this is a tough one. Connecticut is the Mohegan language, meaning along the long river, the Connecticut River. The origin of our state's name. Is it an accident of geography, being situated between two urban centers of New York and Boston, or a coastline dotted with small, picturesque harbors, towns, or even the ever-changing seasons, creating ideal images for artists to paint? Well, likely it's all three. The state of Connecticut is truly the cradle of Impressionism. Connecticut became the home of 6 distinctive art colonies, which developed from the mid-1880s through to the mid-1920s. This is more than any other state in the country, and that's worth repeating, more than any other state in our country. At the core of the development of the state's art colonies were two things: a revolutionary new way of painting called Impressionism, and a steady stream of students returning from living, studying, and painting in Europe's numerous art colonies, and anxious to replicate that experience in this country. Americans had been studying in Europe as early as 1758, when Benjamin West became a permanent expatriate in England. However, the numbers increased dramatically with the onset of French Barbizon movement of the 1850s, and it then exploded after the infamous exhibition in 1874 with Monet's painting Sunrise Impression. Studying in Europe, especially France, gave the young artist exposure to this new, exciting approach. These students experienced something else new. Living in art colonies among other aspiring artists became as important to their experience as their studies. It soon became almost mandatory for young artists to study in Europe. It was a rite of passage. The state of Connecticut fostered the development of 6 colonies. As Mickey said earlier, Cos Cob, Silvermine, what's over there, Westport, Old Lyme, Mystic, and the Kent community in the upper northwest Litchfield Hills area. The colonies each developed their own personalities and differences, but they shared many characteristics as well. A rural setting with ample subjects to paint, easy access to urban centers for the sale and exhibition of their work, and meetings with clients. A communal center within the colony for socializing, reliable transportation, especially by rail, and a collegial atmosphere, and not to be overlooked, cheap rent. The state of Connecticut fulfilled these requirements. Now we're looking at Cos Cob. Cos Cob is a village suburb of Greenwich. It was among the first locations to attract clusters of returning art students. Summer art classes began around 1880 with the charismatic John Henry Twachtman, who was joined by his close friend J. Alden Weir. The two were formidable teachers whose work, you might think, influenced each other. From Twachtman, often painted the White Bridge, which you just saw, to Weir's masterpiece, the Red Bridge. Well, you might begin to think they both loved bridges. It is fair to say this tiny village in Greenwich did more to foster the growth of Impressionism than any other gathering place of artists. The village's proximity to New York, only 38 minutes away by train, its coastal setting, bucolic subject matter to paint, and along with reasonable rents and the central location of the Bush Holly House, all contributed to making Cos Cob a place for artists to gather. Yet, while many of the leading Impressionists found Cos Cob a wonderful place to visit, they tended not to live there permanently. And for all of its importance, Cos Cob was small in terms of artist membership. Many of the prominent artists passed through, but did not stay. Essentially, the Cos Cob colony lasted from about 1890 to around 1920, when its importance and influence began to dwindle. As we said, in 1874, Claude Monet exhibited a painting in Paris, which resulted in a new word and style of painting that forced its way into the art world, Impressionism. And, as said earlier, the painting was Sunrise Impression, and was fiercely attacked, once again, by that art critic, Louis Leroy, who contemptuously labeled it a mere impression. The term stuck and did the appeal of the work as well. First of the art colonies was Cos Cob, the most influential of all the art groups until about 1920. John Henry Twachtman became the first American artist to practice and teach the principles of Impressionism, and the founder of the Cos Cob colony. Even prior to the development of Impressionism, aspiring American artists were traveling to Europe to learn and study, but as the impact of Impressionism increased in the 1880s, the floodgates truly opened, and soon it became a virtual necessity for young artists to study and embrace the expatriatic life that they experienced in Paris, here, Pont-Aven, also Giverny, Grèze, and others. Twachtman's earlier work, before exploring the teachings of Impressionism, reflected the Barbizon style in Europe, and this masterpiece shows Twachtman's early love of winter, entitled Connecticut Shore. Twachtman taught at the Art Students League. During the winter, he held classes in Cos Cob during the summer months. This is an image of Twachtman teaching at the Art Students League in New York at around 1890. Although he had visited Cos Cob in the early 1880s, in 1897, he purchased a home on Round Hill Road in Greenwich. This is how that home looks today. It soon became a meeting place for visiting artists. It's felt by many scholars that Twachtman's best paintings were executed right on his property, and that he painted virtually every angle of his home. This circa 1902. You will see the fact that and here's his painting, same subject. His painting and the same perspective from the same location. Twachtman's love of snow is often seen in this piece entitled The Old Holly House. Often the visiting artist would stay at the Bush Holly House, and painted by many who was there, the visiting artist is this photo of the Palmer and Duff store on Strickland Road, circa 1900, and painted by Twachtman in the late 1890s. And most of the other artists painted that scene as well. It's been greatly simplified and missing a lot of the details, but it's only 8 by 10 inches in size. Now, we've seen several of Twachtman's mature Impressionist work. His earlier piece, which is on display over there, reflecting the influence of the Barbizon artist, is circa mid-1880s, entitled Dock, Vessel, Cos Cob. He abandoned these earlier tonalist works to ultimately become at the forefront of Impressionism, as seen in this snow piece entitled Winter Harmony, painted right on his own property. Twachtman's teaching and paintings were greatly admired by most of the important artists of the day. Child Hassam, and this is entitled In the Old House, and it is the Bush Holly House in Cos Cob, 1914. Another is Theodore Robinson, a major name, The Shipyard, painted 1894, with, as we said earlier, the Palmer and Duff building seen in the distance. And Willard Metcalf, autumn scene with wonderful Impressionist brushwork in the tree leaf, entitled October Morning, 1915. But Twachtman was not commercially successful with the public, generally considered too experimental, pushing Impressionism to its limits. It's said his work was often so ethereal and approaching abstraction that he's the first artist whose paintings were exhibited upside down. Now, as I said, don't laugh, because what you're looking here at is an internet advertisement for the sale of a book on Cos Cob. The cover image is a well-known Twachtman, and it is illustrated upside down, and that's on internet. Amazing. And that catalog is over there. The second featured Cos Cob artist is Leonard Ockman, and this is not the law firm of Twachtman and Ockman. They are real names. This is an image of Leonard Ockman and his artist wife, Mina. Between the two men, both were born a year of each other. That's Twachtman and Ockman. Yet Twachtman died at 50 and Ockman at 80. Both arrived in Cos Cob within a year of each other, and both were founding members of the Greenwich Society of Artists. Also, they both painted in the same location while working in Europe. There, the similarity ceased. Ockman was not a revolutionary experimenter. His gradual move towards Impressionism was conservative and measured, often retaining elements of tonalism. Nevertheless, he was acknowledged as a major impressionist and was a prolific exhibitor and prize winner. His cooler palette is evident in this sweeping landscape. While it is unidentified spot, the artist has given us, let's say, some hint as to where the scene is located because of the ever-present and ubiquitous Connecticut stone walls, which are included on the left side of the picture. Ockman was basically a studio painter and composed his works primarily from memory and notes. He rarely intended to represent a specific location, although his favorite spot to paint was the Mianus River Gorge area in Cos Cob. Here, we see a rare example whose title, On the Mianus River, 1896, does identify a specific location. Leonard Ockman had a long and productive career, as this photo shows towards the end of his life. Among knowledgeable art scholars, Ernest Lawson was associated more with the ashcan painters in New York City, and basically urban city scene. He definitely is not a neat fit or an easy fit in describing artists who visited and painted in Cos Cob. What is anticipated among viewers of his work are scenes like this: High Bridge at night, circa 1915. An urban scene in his favorite season, winter, but not dominated by skyscrapers and gritty city street scenes teeming with people, which is often seen in the work of the ashcan artists. This is a spectacular scene painted by Lawson entitled Spring Night, Harlem River, 1913, which dealt with the subtleties of night picture while still giving enough light so that reflections are seen on the river. Lawson began his studies in Europe in late 1893, once rooming with the author Somerset Maugham, who based his character, Frank Lawson, in his 1915 novel of Human Bondage. Lawson was likely painted more rural landscapes than city scenes, and he rarely depicted the figure as the central theme in his painting. His attraction to Cos Cob was as a young art student, studying with Twachtman and Weir, roughly 20 years his senior. In 1891, dissatisfied with the Art Students League in New York, Lawson began attending the summer courses in Cos Cob in 1892 and 93. His work matured. Pieces like this tiny little thing, while small, demonstrates Lawson's use of thickly applied paint, producing a rich surface, or, as we said earlier, impasto, and intense color, yielding what was dubbed by the art press at the time the crushed jewel effect. It is a fully realized image of trees, flowers, and a path to a home in the Cos Cob area. According to Cos Cob scholar Susan Larkin, she's the one whose book was illustrated upside down, both teachers insisted upon simplicity, direct observation, and emotional response. Lawson's first painting, submitted for critique by J. Alden Weir, received the following, quote, "By Jove, I've never seen such a bad picture." Over the next decade or more, Lawson returned to Cos Cob many, many times. From the rocky beginning that Lawson received, ultimately he was praised by his two teachers as the best student they had, and the great William Merritt Chase stated Ernest Lawson was the finest landscape painter in America. The harsh criticism paid off. In addition to the three artists we've focused on, with examples of their work, we've also looked at the work by Childe Hassam, J. Alden Weir, and Willard Metcalf, all important contributors to the Cos Cob colony. There were others, especially Theodore Robinson, who first visited Cos Cob in 1888 and made frequent but short trips while spending 6 months a year in Giverny, France, as Claude Monet's next-door neighbor and friend. Robinson captured scenes of the boatyard, which we've looked at earlier. This piece is entitled the E.M.J. Betty, 1894. Perhaps unintentionally, projects the gradual decline of shipping and a major income source for Cos Cob. Fewer and fewer cargo vessels headed for New York City as the 19th century came to a close. An influential and lifelong resident of the colony, dedicated to its importance, was Elmer McCrae. In one of the many inexplicable turn of events in the art world, McCrae was active in establishing the groundbreaking 1913 Armory Show. His work was exhibited there along with European modernism, known as the 1913 Armory Show, the most shocking and controversial piece to appear, which is now considered an icon of modernism, was Nude Descending the Staircase, was exhibited, as was this work by Elmer McCrae. This piece brought that piece you just saw, brought the second highest price of any work sold, surpassing Marcel Duchamp's Nude Descending a Staircase. Go figure that out. Historical perspective changes with the passage of time. As an aside, 12 artists, members of Cos Cob, exhibited in the transformative Armory Show. This thickly painted scene by McCrae is entitled Schooner in Ice, painted in 1900. The ascendancy of the railroad to surpass ships in hauling cargo is symbolized by the locomotive crossing the bridge in the distance, pulling freight cars and the cargo ships. In the foreground, frozen ice, motionless. Yet another devoted student of Twachtman was Charles Ebert. This is a magnificent portrait of his artist wife and child, entitled Mary Roberts Ebert and Child. The minimal rendering of the facial details reflects the influence of Twachtman's teaching. Here we see Twachtman with a student down near what is called the lower landing area. Now we're going to take a look at Silvermine. The Silvermine colony is a picturesque wooded area straddling the towns of Wilton, New Canaan, Norwalk, and the Silvermine River. Among the landmark buildings, was the Silvermine Tavern, seen here in 1929. That's the Silvermine Tavern, 1929. Despite its name, there is no confirming evidence or even the existence of a silver mine. In today's terminology, we would call it fake news. What did exist in the 19th century were 11 operating lumber mills. Seen here is the Buttery Mill circa 1900, which was the first mill to be established on the Silvermine River and the last to close down. In addition to plentiful support of lumber were several small farms. The commitment to operating lumber mills is best represented by this image of a whole family's dedication to the enterprise. The appeal of Silvermine as an art colony was the inexpensive studio space that became available as lumber mills closed and farms were abandoned by the local farmers. Their structures became ideal for artist studios. First to settle in Silvermine in 1906 was the internationally recognized sculptor Solon Borglum. Here he is in his studio with his dog, Lady. His brother was Gutzon Borglum, the sculptor of Mount Rushmore. The second to follow was Addison T. Millar, whom we'll be discussing in detail in just a moment. As more artists arrived, under the influence of Borglum, 12 artists became the founder of the Silvermine colony in 1908. A unique group was founded, which became called the Knockers. Members of the group met every Sunday in Borglum's barn to have their paintings critiqued or not. They were, as a critic put it, they were, quote, sure of frank and competent criticism, which may not augment self-esteem, but very likely result in self-improvement. Members of the group were expected to participate every Sunday, as well as show their work in the annual summer exhibition. Seen here is the 1909 exhibition held in Borglum's barn. From the Silvermine founding in 1908 to 1922, the membership of professional artists expanded to 68. Tragically, Borglum passed away in 1922, forcing the group to rethink their situation and formalize themselves as the Silvermine Guild of Artists, which is what it is today, retains that identity. The second artist to arrive in Silvermine in 1907, the year after Borglum, was Addison T. Millar. Millar had recently returned from an extended period painting in Europe and North Africa. His work in Europe, and especially in Algeria, focused on the genre scene, intended to be tight and academic. This scene in Algeria, entitled Café Bausarde, and is very typical of Millar's painting that focused on the street life and small stalls of merchants selling goods from what we see here already, and coffee shops as well, found in every one of the bazaars in the region. His conversion to Impressionism was rapid. After settling into Silvermine, his palette lightened, and brushwork loosened up, as seen in this wonderfully impressionistic piece, Autumn Morning, which is owned by the New Canaan Historical Society. This featured example is entitled Fishing the Little Silvermine. It's on display on the table there. It seems that fishing is a very cerebral appeal, perhaps even rejuvenating quality. Passionate devotees swear by it. It works for them. Millar focused on the lush green landscape, light and shadow pattern. It seems he's kind of playing a game with the viewer, because he deftly positions the seated woman in red, partially obscured by the trees. The painting title invites the viewer to examine it more closely to discover who is doing the fishing. This wonderful piece entitled On the Shore is a direct reflection of Millar's close connection with William Merritt Chase. Millar studied with him in Shinnecock, Long Island, and when they both were in Europe, they met up together in Spain. While residing in Silvermine, Millar developed a fascination with the automobile and enjoyed touring around the countryside. In 1913, at 53 years old and an active member of the Silvermine group, he was hit by the Pittsfield Express at a railroad crossing in Norwalk and killed. Although Addison T. Millar's period in Silvermine was fairly brief, only 6 years, his move to Impressionism was quite remarkable. Charles Rieffel. His career proved to be the exception to the popular belief that to become a successful professional artist, one must start training early in life. After years of uneventful jobs and little indication of an artistic skill, Raphael dabbled in lithography and an occasional oil sketch. After close to a year in North Africa and Europe, drawing and sketching, at 42 years old, a group of sketches were sold. And 4 years later, at 46 years old, a large oil earned a prestigious award. Charles Raphael was on his way. In 1912, at 50 years old, he settled into Silvermine. He quickly became a prolific exhibitor with works like this, entitled Logging in the Wilton Woods, 1915. In national and international exhibitions, with his contemporaries like George Bellows and Robert Henry, Raphael's work attracted the critics, comparing him with Twachtman. Quote, the difference between them is a matter of strength. Twachtman is all delicacy, vague, and tenuous. Raphael is direct, candid, and clear. This major work, which happens to be on display, reveals his unique skill and why he was considered the most accomplished of the Silvermine landscape artists, and the one thought of as adopting the influences of modernism. His distinctive brushwork is evident in this close-up, strong color, vigorous paint application. Raphael was active in the group during the 12 years he remained in Silvermine and served as the first president of the Silvermine Artists Guild in 1924. He was vacationing in Southern California, and a chance snowstorm diverted him to a largely untouched backcountry area in San Diego. He fell in love with the place and remained there the rest of his career. As a Southern California Impressionist. These are my opinion. Although somewhat judgmental, it seems the success that Raphael enjoyed in the East, while deeply involved with the Silvermine Guild, eluded him to some degree during the remaining years of his life in the West Coast. Even though he continued to win prizes and awards, the modernism that made him so noteworthy back in the East may have been a drawback in the West. The artist, illustrator, Harry Townsend studied under the great teachers Frank Duveneck, Howard Pyle, and at the Chicago Academy of the Fine Arts, as well as the Art Students League in New York. He was multi-talented, working in oil, watercolor, block print, engravings, and etching. During World War I, if we can get his face, during World War I, he was commissioned in the American Expeditionary Forces as a combat artist to illustrate the daily lives of the doughboys. As seen here, a critic of the day observed, he produced a number of images showing the rigors of combat, eventually leaving little to distinguish between the winners and the losers in war. Many of his drawings and sketches of dignitaries at the Versailles Peace Conference now reside in the Smithsonian. Townsend moved to Norwalk in 1921, became a member of Silvermine Guild, as well as 9 other Connecticut and New York artist organizations. While residing in Norwalk, he worked under the WPA, Federal Arts Project, and created 2 murals for the town. First, Settlers in Norwalk and Purchase of Norwalk. This piece, entitled The Glass, is a bit of a departure from traditional Silvermine art. It demonstrates Harry Townsend's mastery of fluid impressionist painting technique. The focus is on the figure's dress and its stunning color. It captures the essence of a quiet moment, privacy, a young woman in her dressing room. It is what I call artist as spy, a very private and unseen by others moment. There were many other competent artists in addition to the 3 that we featured. Daniel Putnam Brindley was a central figure in the Silvermine. He is seen here working on a mural for the St. Paul's on the Green Church in Norwalk. This wonderful image of 2 young women by the edge of a pond represents his earlier pure impressionist style, which lasted about only 5 years when he began to adopt a more stylized post-impressionist approach. Brindley was a resident of New Canaan for many years. This stunning landscape is by perhaps the oldest member of the Silvermine group, Hamilton, born 1847 and 65 years old when he became a member in 1912. His lengthy studies in Europe produced a commitment to the Barbizon principles, which are still somewhat evident in this really brilliant work as he was gradually moving towards Impressionism. Another gifted landscape artist, George Picknell, also became a member of Silvermine in 1912. This autumn scene is a tribute to the Connecticut landscape. 2 years after his passing in 1943, his work was prominently featured in the Silvermine Guild's 50th anniversary exhibition. Howard Hildebrand was a nationally recognized artist and a member of the National Academy of Design in New York, and that's a big deal. Although primarily a portrait and figure painter, he frequently positioned his subjects in outdoor, natural settings. This piece not only reflects his skill with landscape and his use of broken color brushwork, but it is an appropriate for closing out this segment entitled Springtime Silvermine River. Thank you all. Anybody want this? They can have it.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much.